Halloween is my second favorite holiday. Or is it my first? Really, counting Thanksgiving, it's probably my third. This is all fluff so I can set the theme for the episode. All you really need to know is I'm not a fan of the horror element of Halloween and much prefer to see it as a celebration of sugar and an excuse to wear odd clothing that is surprisingly comfortable to parties where I can hopefully get drunk. It used to be about trick-or-treating, a more innocent social event that didn't end with me waking up in a McDonald's restroom, but I can't go trick-or-treating anymore because I'm 23 and people won't open their doors when I knock in fear of their lives.
Luckily, there's Costume Quest, a series that tries to capture the spirit of Halloween so that adults like myself can continue to do so well past the point of it not being weird. The story begins with you and your sibling going out for trick-or-treating, but it doesn't start off so well. No one wants to give candy to the group with a giant candy corn for a costume, and for good reason. Candy corn is terrible. But at the second house you knock on, a monster opens the door, mistakes your sibling for the real thing, and kidnaps them to pay tribute to their master. To get them back, you're going to have to trick-or-treat your way through the town, fighting monsters and foiling their plans of stealing all the Halloween candy in the process. It's a cute story, accompanied by funny conversations and a strangely accurate animated cat butthole that'll leave you with a smile on your face when you're done. The story, not the cat butthole. But playing the game can get a bit tiring towards the end. Costume Quest has light adventure elements, and by light, I mean the same elements over and over again. Every area has the same 3 activities: bobbing for apples, play hide and seek, go trick-or-treating. You will do each 3 times, because there's 3 areas. I can only imagine what's going through our character's mind on the 3rd round of hide and seek they have to play. I gotta do this shit again? How about we play some fucking tag or something? Oh, sorry, that was me. That's what was going through my mind. This is fucking boring. Rather than come up with something different to do in each area, they instead just make doing these things easier with every iteration. Each neighborhood is smaller than the last, with the last set of houses blatantly sandwiched together for your convenience. And the other adventure elements that Costume Quest doesn't reuse really should have been. Some of the costumes you can wear in the game have special uses. Your first costume lets you travel faster and jump over ramps. Your second costume lets you protect your head from falling objects, and your third costume gets you into an Abraham Lincoln party. But your fourth costume lights up dark areas, and your fifth costume lets you sneak past someone like only this one time, and your sixth costume also does like one thing this one time, and every costume after that does nothing. The farther you get into the game, the less you'll use your costume's abilities, and the less costumes you'll get with any ability at all. Despite that, the game still forces you to find costumes as a way to get past certain barriers, and after a bit, it starts to feel a little hollow. The little use for your costume's abilities don't warrant those abilities to exist at all, and instead can get frustrating when you have to change into a costume just for a single button press. Had all the costumes their own special ability and a place where you had to use it frequently, this would have fit with most of the game's design, since it would have encouraged players to remain in those costumes and enter battles with them. Everything else you can do in Costume Quest always leads back to improving your abilities in battle. Quests give you XP, and trick-or-treating gets you candy which you can use to buy equipment, but also has a chance of forcing you into a fight with the monsters. But for a game that's so fixated on its combat, it sure does have a weak battle system. Costume Quest is a simple RPG, perhaps a little too simple, even for the audience that it's aimed at. The game has turn-based battles where your character transforms into a superpowered version of whatever they're dressed as. So your cardboard boxes turn you into a mech, your ninja costume makes you a ninja, and your French fries costume turns you into a giant French fry crab. Every costume has a basic attack and a special move that you need to charge up by taking and dealing damage before you can use it. Battles are made dynamic with the use of action commands, which are basically quick time events that increase the damage of your attacks and decrease the damage of enemy attacks if you succeed them. There's a total of 4 different action commands that all require you to push a random button either repeatedly or at the right time, that sort of thing. But with 9 different costumes, some of which only exist to be used in battles, you wonder why they didn't make 5 more action action commands to make each one play a little different. It's weird too, because each costume's special ability does something unique, like heal your party members or give one party member a free dodge, and it feels like they stop short of giving each costume a complete identity. And just like with having to redo activities and quests, having a brand new costume that ultimately plays like one you already have and not having another reason to wear it makes battles just as repetitive as everything else in the game.
And yet, when Costume Quest tries to add some complexity to itself, it ends up being unbalanced.
You're able to equip each of your party members with battle stamps, items that can grant passive bonuses or an additional ability. Problem is, you can only equip one on each character, and a select few are clearly better than the others. For example, one of the stamps gives your party member a move that stuns enemies for a turn, and it's 100% likely to do it from what I've seen. Another ability allows you to hit all enemies with splash damage while still doing a full attack on one of them. Battles don't last long and turn sour quickly, which makes these stamps incredibly powerful, so that's 2 stamps you'll always use and their upgraded versions on 2 of your 3 party members. The stamp system, though neat and allowing for a little customization, doesn't really encourage it because the other stamps aren't nearly as useful and you get the good ones pretty early on.
Don't get the impression that Costume Quest is mediocre or annoying. It's a fun game, it just seems like it's holding back.
Costume Quest attempts to include children in its audience, or at least that's how it plays. It does this narratively, with the story both appealing to older people wanting to revisit a part of their childhood and bringing to life the imaginations of younger people running around in their Halloween costumes. In gameplay, it wants to avoid complexity wherever it can while still having compelling elements that older audiences can enjoy. But ultimately, I think it underestimates the competency of children. It keeps things so simple that they end up mundane, and it prevents itself from having depth to avoid confusing kids, but takes it to such an extent that it forgets to have any variety, something kids cling on to like feral animals.
But luckily for people like me that feel like they could have done better, there's Costume Quest 2.
And Costume Quest 2 is up there with other sequels that improve on their preceding game in almost every single way. Your starting costumes don't have any adventure abilities, but your faster movement ability now has its own dedicated button, and every costume you find afterwards has an ability that you'll use frequently in the areas you find them in. All of the costumes are used to solve adventure puzzles throughout the entire game, and oftentimes the activities in each area revolve around the costume you get in it. In one motion, Costume Quest 2 makes sure that the light adventure elements are both consistent and varied. Different quests, different costumes needed, visually distinct areas with a little verticality to them, and different forms of platforming. No animated cat buttholes though. But the battle system holds the biggest and most crucial improvements to the series. Action commands are simplified even further, with each character being mapped to one of the face buttons, and all that remains of the old battle system are one kind of action command and your costume special moves. It doesn't sound much more appealing than what we had before, right? But with the simplification of action commands, they were able to add a lot of new different mechanics to it in general. A second tier of precise timing for the action commands was added so that players that waited longer to match the button press in time with the attack landing would get rewarded with even more damage and defense at the risk of missing the timing entirely. And as the player gains levels, they learn new techniques like combos and countering, which opens their capabilities in combat alongside progression in the story, and also expands how the action commands get used. Costume Quest 2 also adds enemy types and gives costumes strengths and weaknesses against them. This gives the player the need to mix and match costumes to fight enemies, while at the same time maintaining to wear certain costumes they need outside of battles, which means that they'll try out each costume at least once to see if it works well with what they're already wearing. Battle stamps are gone, but the collectible items from the first game, Creepy Treats, take their place as the equipable item. Unlike the battle stamps, Creepy Treats are usable items that have cooldowns in between battles, and instead of equipping one to each character, all your party members can use the 3 you choose to bring entering into fights. Because you can't use them in consecutive battles, you swap out the creepy treats on cooldown for a different set of 3 that hopefully work well together. By the end of the game, you'll not only have multiple combinations of costumes figured out, you'll also have rotations of your favorite creepy treat setups as well. This all makes for more engaging and varied battles as opposed to the rinse and repeat rhythm the first Costume Quest's battles had. And because Costume Quest 2's adventure elements once again predominantly exist to feed into the combat, the overall gameplay is much more satisfying and wholesome.
As satisfying and wholesome as Costume Quest 2's story.
While Costume Quest 1 can be too simple and loses its charm the longer you play it, Costume Quest 2 does a much better job of hitting that all ages vibe. The story is much more fantastical than the last, with time travel involved and an evil dentist hellbent on ridding the world of candy. You still cater to the imagination of the children, but have a story with interesting locations and a fun premise. And when you play the game, you're slowly introduced to more and more mechanics that remain simple and spaced out appropriately for the kids that might not grasp everything all at once, but also add a sense of progression for older players and keep things from being too static.
And yes, this is the part where I try to interpret something profound out of a children's game.
If you've ever worn a costume or acted out a role in something, you'll be familiar with the odd sense of confidence you have pretending to be someone else. In a darker context, some of us might have a history of doing things we otherwise wouldn't have done if we weren't trying to keep up pretenses. But to maintain the positive message here, sometimes who you are isn't good enough. Oh, good job, GC. Great way to open up an enlightening monologue. No, please continue to make an ass out of yourself. It's fine. What I mean is, you're not always going to be able to do the things you want by being yourself. Are you fucking kidding me, dude? What I mean is, there are going to be times in your life when it might be better to be someone else. Knocking on a stranger's door in regular clothing to ask for something can be intimidating. It can be scary, but doing it while wearing a costume or a mask, protected by a facade that you can take off once you're more comfortable, that's easier. Hell, that's ideal. And sometimes we like the costumes that we put on. We want to keep wearing them because it turns out we like that person more than the person we are now. And after we do this more than a couple of times, the costumes we wore, the superhero, the shining knight, the clown, the candy corn, they start to reflect who we've become instead of who we want to be. And once we've done it enough, we don't need the costumes anymore to be those things. So really, when you think about it, what Costume Quest wants us to understand is Halloween is fucking dope, dude.
And that's all I've got today. Until next time, my name's GC. Remember that you are amazing and have a happy Halloween.